Why do we resist cooking? The biggest enemy of flow in the kitchen is a bogged down mindset. When I ask people what stops them from cooking more healthy meals from scratch at home, I often hear some version of the following. I hate cooking. Cooking feels like a waste of my time. I am sick of making dinner. Why is it always me who's expected to know what's for dinner and somehow make it appear? Dread and resentment abound. I can totally relate to this because I too sometimes feel the same, often at 5:47 p.m. on a weeknight. Why is it that we hate cooking so much? I have some explanations to volunteer for that, along with suggested practices that you can experiment with to find joy in cooking and start moving toward a state of flow. Flow in the kitchen is the topic of my book, Flow in the Kitchen: Practices for Healthy, Stress-Free Vegan Cooking. I published this book at the end of 2022, and I strongly encourage you to have a look at it. The first section is all about cooking mindset. The second half of the book is about improvising different kinds of dishes based on the standards of healthy vegan cooking. And in this video, I am going to read to you the rest of chapter 3. I think it is essential that we reflect on our cooking mindset because really, I can't think of very many things that are more important than eating really good food. And that is only going to happen if basically we cook it for ourselves. So please hang on, stay with me, and we are going to keep talking about this big question of why do we resist, why do we even hate cooking? And I have to say, I don't especially like cooking. Despite having this YouTube channel that is largely dedicated to cooking, it is not my favorite thing to do, and that is why we are here to reflect about this. Hate cooking, blame capitalism. What gets valued most in our contemporary capitalist culture is what makes the most money and what boosts the gross domestic product, also known as GDP. Let's call that production. On the flip side, we can call reproduction the love and the effort that we put into nurturing the circle of life, from bringing and raising children into the world to caring for our elders. When it's done for free, that work is not measured. Thus, it is not valued within the capitalist system. It's just taken for granted that it happens. From that perspective, home cooking is only valuable as much as it helps sell cookbooks and magazines, kitchen appliances, microwave, the dinners, and other convenience ingredients and gizmos that you will want to buy because you think they will make cooking better, easier, faster. There is one way that cooking becomes economically valuable. It is when it is no longer done at home with love by mom, for example, but instead outsourced to someone who is paid to do it. When that happens, reproductive work moves into the sphere of production and it starts to count. That is why restaurant food, meal kits, and all manners of value-added foods that have been prepared and processed to make them ready to eat, or at least easier to prepare as opposed to whole foods, are growing so steadily as a sector of the economy. The unfortunate coincidence is that those foods are also steadily increasing our waistlines. When we say, I hate cooking, we are mirroring how we have internalized that devaluation of cooking as an act of service and love. When we eat industrially prepared meals, we give those economic forces further power to shape our bodies and our minds. Potatoes or value-added foods? Let's think about potatoes. A farmer buys some seed potatoes, plants them in the ground, tends to them, harvests them, and brings them to the farmer's market, where you can buy them to make mashed potatoes at home. That's a short economic chain with very few opportunities for money to change hands along the way. Now imagine adding value to the potatoes by combining them with other ingredients to create a packaged, microwavable dinner sold at a big box store. Those convenient products create many more opportunities for jobs, transactions, profit, and taxation. Bonus, whoever was cooking the potatoes previously, let's say mom, can now work longer hours at a real job and earn a higher income. In short, the most influential forces in our society benefit more when we don't eat healthy, home-cooked meals. Incidentally, medical care for those suffering from diet-induced disease also counts towards the GDP. Is that not just an awful system? We like to believe in ourselves as independent thinkers, sure, but the truth is that it's very hard to be detached completely from those powerful undercurrents. Economic powers directly and indirectly shape our view through advertising and cultural products that represent normal. There are some counterforces in society, as evidenced by the fact that you're currently reading this book, but they are not as powerful. We have reduced food to a transaction. Food to me is a sacred gift that I offer myself and my loved ones. But outside of a handful of rebel kitchens and gardens, food has become the subject of just another transaction in our everyday life. It's nothing more than a commodity to be sold and bought. Buyers and sellers are only remotely concerned with food's nourishing qualities. We lose sight of the miracle that food embodies. We forget that it is nourishment born from a simple seed nurtured by the sun, soil, water, and farmer. Making matters worse, we have come to see food as the sum of a very limited range of individual and discrete nutrients. We weigh protein, carbohydrates, and fat, we add our macros, and we compare ratios. We compute values for the few nutrients that we think we understand, most notably iron and calcium. Some people believe that a calorie is a calorie is a calorie. Such a simplistic view of food leads us to believe that we know what we're eating when we read the label slapped on commercially available food. That is a profound delusion. Our quantitative simplifications do not even start to reflect the complexity of food and nutrition. As highlighted in the book Whole, and also in The Future of Nutrition by T. Colin Campbell, who is also the lead author of the China study, every plant is an assemblage of thousands of different organic and inorganic chemicals, only a fraction of which we pay attention to. Despite decades of study, we have barely scratched the surface of an understanding of the interactions between those nutrients. We cannot yet fully appreciate how they transform from seed to harvest to fork, how they are metabolized within the human body. When we say, "I hate cooking," and we expedite meals by filling ourselves with whatever calories we find most convenient to procure and perhaps tasty to eat, we smugly ignore the complexity of nature. We fail to honor the miracle of life. Mind the spiritual gap. Beyond the forces of biology, we also ignore the metaphysical dimensions of food. Hinduism in particular sees food as imbued with the spiritual energy that was put in it at all stages of its preparation. Regardless of our religion or lack thereof, we can appreciate the truly added value of preparing food as an act of love and service. For the cook, crafting a meal is an opportunity to be thankful for our lives, for the abundance of ingredients we get to choose from, and for the other beings we get to share the meal with. When we say, "I hate cooking," we deny ourselves this deeply soothing practice. When we cook with resentment and bitterness, we infuse the food with those negative feelings. When we put people who don't love us in charge of our meals, we put our bodies and our souls at risk. When not cooking is not a choice. The powerful economic forces that devalue food also devalue humans in general by casting us first and foremost as accessories for profit. Some of us have the resources and the privilege to resist those forces and fight back with homemade plant-based soup. Others lack secure housing with adequate cooking facilities or are too exhausted from working multiple jobs to try and make ends meet, and they doubly suffer. First, they experience the indignity of being unable to cook their own food and share it with loved ones. Second, sooner or later, they also hurt from the painful consequences of malnourishment, on their physical and mental health. If we can easily access the resources to cook, but we still say, I hate cooking, we are wasting the gifts that are bestowed upon us. What if embracing a more nourishing way to live gave us the energy to share those gifts with those who need them? Flip your mindset on cooking. If you've made it to this point and you still think that you hate cooking, here's a few things you can do. Instead of saying, I hate cooking, try saying, sometimes I hate cooking. Or part of me hates cooking. Hating cooking is not who you are. It is not your identity. It's just how you feel at a certain moment. Next, you can try saying, I am learning to love cooking. Or, I am practicing making cooking feel better right now. Think of it this way. You don't have to cook. You get to cook. Observe what happens when you start to liberate yourself from the forces that want you to turn away from this wholesome nourishment. Don't expect instant and perpetual success, but if you practice regularly, you will soon find yourself with a growing appreciation for this great act of love. Conveniently, you get at least 3 opportunities to practice every day at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so get cooking and share the love. Thank you for sticking with me for this little reading from my book, Flow in the Kitchen, Practices for Healthy, Stress-Free Vegan Cooking. You can find the book on Amazon. I will put the link down below, but do not feel like you are limited to Amazon. You can order this from any bookstore pretty much in the world, I think. It will take a few days to a couple of weeks to come, and it will also support your economy a lot more than if you're ordering from Amazon, so please do consider doing that. And if you've enjoyed this, I hope you come back to my kitchen sometime soon so we can talk about food and love and establishing flow in our kitchen together.